Vav Hey, Vav Aleph, Vav Aleph, Vav Aleph. Okay, let me see. Okay. One who cohabitates with his Yuvama, whether mistakenly or wantonly, whether coerced or willingly, even if he was mistaken and she was wanton, or if he was wanton and she was mistaken, or he was coerced and she was not, or she was coerced and he was not, whether the union was only partial or complete, he has acquired her, and there is no distinction between the forms of cohabitation. Similarly, if one cohabitates with any one of the arayas forbidden in the Torah, or one or who's disqualified from marriage, for example, a widow to a Kohen Gadol, a divorcee or kalutza to an ordinary Kohen, a mamzeres or Nisanite to a Yisrael, or the daughter of a Yisrael to a mamzer or Nisanite, he has disqualified her, and there is no distinction between the forms of cohabitation. A widow who is married to a Kohen Gadol, or a divorcee or kalutza who is married to an ordinary Kohen, even if they were only betrothed, they may not eat truma. Reb Elazar and Reb Shimon, however, validated, and if they were widowed or divorced, it was if it was from marriage, they are disqualified, but if from betrothal, they are disqualified. Okay.
Okay. So now, Kohen Gadol lo yisa almana. So we're not just diving into the halachas of the Kohen Gadol, since we were talking about it in the previous Mishnah. So the Kohen Gadol is distinct from a regular Kohen in that he's also not allowed to marry a widow. Bein almana mina eresin, bein almana mina nisuin, whether she was widowed having lived with her husband or not. Lo yisa es habogeres, and furthermore, he is not allowed to marry a grown woman. In other words, from 12 and a half. Right. So according to this Mishnah, he has to marry a girl who's like completely. It says that the pasuk says that she has to marry a girl who's in her virginity, and the limit over this is isha b'suleha yikach kashehi b'sula gemura, when she's still completely in her youth and has barely developed the simanim of growth. Okay, this is only if he marries when he is a Kohen Gadol. If he's a regular Kohen who is promoted, obviously his wife comes with him. He doesn't have to divorce her and find another wife. Okay, and that we'll see actually practically in this Mishnah. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon machshirin b'bogeres, but Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon disagree with this limud about the grown woman. They say he can marry anyone he wants as long as she is a virgin. Lo yisa es mukas eight. He also may not marry a girl whose hymen was damaged by some sort of physical accident. We said mukas eight, like a piece of wood had damaged it. Okay.
Is that because that hymen, they use the hymen as the
Simon,
that and we know that that's not true. That it can be broken just by other means.
That's right. Well, that's exactly the point. Is that if her hymen is broken by other means, then he shouldn't marry her as well. It says because it's that's the siman of her basulim, and there's an explicit pasuk saying that he has to marry a girl who is a basula. So even if her hymen was broken by other means, he shouldn't marry her. I think probably you'd find that's I didn't see this explicitly in Kahati, but that's probably a gezerah, like a durabanan on top of the ikar halacha. Okay. Eres is almana. Now, what happens if a kohen had done eresin on a widow? He hasn't gone to the chuppah yet with her. Okay. V'nismana lios kohen gadol. Now they appoint him to be the kohen gadol. Ichnos. Mutter for him to marry her. He can carry it because she is already his wife, and she's his wife d'oraisa. The only thing that they're lacking is the chuppah. He's still allowed to marry her, and presumably the same thing applies to if she's a bogeres, and definitely if she was his wife already. Okay. Umase b'Yehoshua ben Gamla. So it happened that there was a kohen whose name was Yehoshua ben Gamla. Shekidesh is Marta bas Bartus. And he had betrothed the woman Marta bas Baitus. She was obviously from a prominent family. Uminahu hamelech lios kohen gadol, and the king appointed him to be kohen gadol. Okay, you can hear all the little nuances inside what's happening over here. It's not the job of a king to appoint a kohen gadol. This is during the times of the I think of the Bayis Sheni, when things were getting very corrupt, and people were paying for the privilege of being Kohen Gadol. So I think Baitus himself over here was the the Gemara who bribed the king to make him into the Kohen Gadol. But nonetheless, they still wanted to keep a semblance of halacha anyway. And so he carried on and married. He brought Martha to the chuppah, Martha. And this was permitted, even though he was now the Kohen Gadol, and Martha was a widow from her previous husband.
And it seems that Martha paid a large sum of the Kati says a large sum of money.
Yes, exactly. So this was there was a lot of money changing hands over this, and this happened a lot in the Bayis Sheni. Unfortunately, it was a very corrupt system, and this was the time when all the Kohanim Gedolim were like dropping off on Yom Kippur, and they had to yank them out by the ropes. So it was a very questionable honor to be appointed Kohen Gadol. Like, it was like, no, don't make me. Anyway,
could they? That's a good question. Can they deny? Can they say, no, I don't want to do this?
I guess. I mean, what you got to do? You're going to force him and say you got to go in, and like push him into the Kodesh HaKodashim? I don't know. I think it was that hubris that they had that they went into the Kodesh HaKodashim thinking that they were the one who was going to get through.
Yeah. It would also be the other way around. If they didn't do it, the king will say, all right, let's cut off his head, So either way,
I'm not aware of any such case.
Right. Right.
Anyways, Shomeres Yavam Shin Nafla Lifnei Kohen Hediot. Now, what happens if you have a Yevama who comes, who's the brother is a Kohen, okay, he's a regular Kohen, when Nisman Aliyos Kohen Gadol, and now before he can do Yibum with her, he is appointed to be Kohen Gadol. Now, how does this case compare to the previous case that we said, where he's done Kiddushin with her? She's now his wife, and now he's allowed to marry her, even though he's now the Kohen Gadol. Now there's a Shomeres Yavam in front of him. He was about to do Yibum, and then they appointed him the Kohen Gadol. So now he'd also done that Kiddushin Derabanan with her. Right? And now, so he's done the Ma'amar, so maybe you should let him marry her. Says the Mishnah, Hareze lo yichnos. May not marry her, because this is only a Kiddushin Derabanan, and he is now a Kohen Gadol Doraisa, who's not allowed to marry a widow. There's no, and on the Doraisa level, she's not his wife. So therefore, he's not allowed to marry her, and leave it to one of his other brothers or give her a chalitza. Kohen Gadol shemeis achiv choletz v'lo meyavim. So it just clarifies the halacha over here that if you have a Kohen Gadol who has a Yevama in front of him, he is only allowed to do chalitza. And actually, there's a chiddush in this that it's a bit of a ganai, because the woman's going to have to take off his shoe and spit in front of him, and you think, okay, you don't want to do that to a Kohen Gadol, but you do. Nonetheless, even for a Kohen Gadol, he should submit to chalitza, even though the woman's going to have to spit in front of him. Okay. Mishnah Hey, Kohen Hediot lo yisa ayalonis. A regular Kohen should not marry an ayalonis. This is a woman who does not bring simanim of puberty. So in other words, she never properly matures. Why? Because she's incapable of having children. Now, this is not just a din by a Kohen Hediot, but the reason why we bring the Kohen Hediot over here is because of Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, which we're going to see now, where he is more stringent on Kohanim. But this would actually be a din on a Yisrael as well, because the Yisrael has got a din that he's got to have children. So not just a Kohen Hediot, but anyone should lo yisa ayalonis. You shouldn't marry an ayalonis ela im ken yesh lo isha ubanim, unless he has another wife with whom he's having children. Okay, because so if he wants to take on another wife who's an ayalonis just because he likes her, because she amuses him, whatever the case, he's allowed to take her on as a second wife, but he shouldn't make an ayalonis his primary or only wife, because then he's going to be mevatzel from Pru Urvu.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Afal Pisha Yesh lo isha ubanim lo yisa ayalonis. So he says. So now this is the stringency of Rabbi Yehuda, and the reason why we're mentioning this in connection with the Kohen is that even though even with a wife and other children, a Kohen specifically should not marry an Ailonis. Why? Shehi zona ha'amor b'Torah. Because Rabbi Yehuda says that this is the definition of a zona in the Torah. Why does he hold this? Since she is not able to give birth, it turns out that the only reason he's marrying her is for the pleasure of having relations with her. And therefore and therefore he says this is not a worthy relationship for a Kohen, because this is the zona that's in the Torah. But Chachamim omrim ein zona ela giyores u'meshucheres u'b'sheniv alav b'ilas zinos. Chachamim just reject Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. They say, what's a zona in the Torah? The zona is anyone who comes from non-Jewish origins, right? So giyores or meshucheres. Right, they've come from being non-Jewish, and non-Jews are presumed to be licentious, or else a Jewish woman who we know has had relations with somebody who was asur to her. And not just saying like premarital sex is not a disqualification for a Kohen if it was two people who could have married each other. Mm-hmm. But if she has relationships with somebody who is an ereva to her or with a goy, then that's a psul for a Kohen. That's called a zona. Okay. So of course the halacha follows the chachamim on that a Kohen is allowed to marry an Ailonis if he has an alternative wife. Okay, lo yibatel adam mipiria urvia ilim ken yesh lo banim. So a person may not exempt himself from having children unless he already has children. And this is a famous machlokus of Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai omrim shnei zacharim. They say that the qualification of having had two children is two sons. Where do they get this from? From Moshe Rabbeinu. Because Moshe Rabbeinu separated from his wife after he had two sons. And this was the whole thing with Tzipora and Miriam and the Tzaras and all that story. But basically, he had separated from Tzipora after he had two sons. And Beis Shammai say, well, okay, if that was good enough for Moshe Rabbeinu, that's good enough for us. Beis Hillel omrim zachar and nekeva. They reject this. They say it's got to be a boy and a girl. Shnei zachar and nekeva b'ra'am. It says this is how the world carries on. You need to have a boy and a girl to replace you and to replace the mother and father, and therefore, if you want to carry on the world, you've got to use you've got to have a boy and a girl. Nasa isha. So if you married a woman, v'shaha ima esa shanim, and they lived together for 10 years, v'lo yalda, and she hasn't given birth, eino rashai libatel. He is not permitted to continue to be mevatel from having children. So he must take another wife in order to have children. Gerasha, if he divorces this woman, she is allowed to marry somebody else. It's not that we don't automatically blame her for the problem. Maybe the problem is with him. So she's allowed to marry another man, and maybe she'll have children with him. Okay. And the second guy is also allowed to stay with her for 10 years. However, what's not written in here is that if she is married to two consecutive men for 10 years and neither of them has children with her, then the chances are it's her fault, and therefore if she marries again, if he divorces her as well, then she shouldn't marry another man who needs to have children. She can marry a man who's already had children, but the problem is the infertility problem is presumed to be hers.
Where does the 10 years come from? That the first man did it for 10 years?
Yeah, good question. Where does 10 years come from? Because it's not from Avraham or Sarah. Sorry, from Abraham, Batikach Sarai Eshes Abraham is Hagar Zechel Davar. There we go. It is from Abraham. After 10 years, they had been living in Eretz Canaan, and Sarah still hadn't given birth to anyone. So that's when she said, "Okay, take Hagar to and to have children. So after they've been living there, so that the yeshiva in Chutz La'aretz wasn't counted in the time that they were that they needed to have children. Interesting. Okay. If she miscarried, then you start the count again from the time that she miscarried. I guess that's clearly a symbol that she's fertile. Anyways, ha'ish mitzvah al piria or verivia, aval lo ha'isha. The man is the one with the mitzvah of having children, not the woman. Which is an interesting drasha. Like, why is it on the man and not on the woman? But the limit from this is from it says in Bereshis, Bru urvu umiluos ha'aretz v'kivshuha, but it says kivshuha is written without a vav, which is teaching us that it's that this is something on the man, because it's the man whose derech it is to conquer, the lichbosh. So therefore, he's the one who's got the din of priya or via v'lo ha'isha, not the woman. And some learn it from what's written to Yaakov. It says that Hashem says to Yaakov, pray urvei. It says to him in the singular, you go and be fruitful and multiply. It doesn't say pru urvu over there. So that's the limud from the Torah, that it's specifically on the man. But Rabbi Yochanan ben Baruch disagrees. Al shneim hu omer vayvarech osam Elohim vayomer lahem Elohim pru urvu. That Jesus learns it straight from the plural that both women and men are obligated in pru urvu. The halacha is like the chachamim, that it's only on the man. I guess the drasha that I usually hear on this is the fact that childbirth is dangerous, and that the Torah doesn't want to give a mitzvah on a woman to tell her that you have to endanger yourself.
It does say that in Bereshis. It said Hashem said, and God blessed them, and said to them, be fruitful and multiply.
Yes. So that's Rabbi Yochanan ben Baruch's basis for arguing the point. He says that this is something that's said to both of them. They both have the obligation. Mm-hmm. Okay. Gimel Tes.
If three brothers were married to three strangers, and one of them died, and then the second performed mama with her and also died, they require chalitza, but may not be taken in yibum. It stated, and one of them dies, her husband's brother shall come to her. Only a widow who is attached by one brother's bond is subject to yibum, not a widow who is attached by two brothers' bonds. Reb Shimon says he may perform yibum with whichever one he wishes, but then he must perform chalitza with the other. If two brothers were married to two sisters, and one of them died, and the second one's wife died, she is forbidden to him forever, because she was once forbidden to him. Two men who betrothed two women, but when they entered the bridal canopy, they were confused one with the other. They are obligated to bring a sin offering because of adultery. If they were brothers because of the prohibition against a brother's wife, if they were sisters because of the prohibition against a wife's sister, if they were menstruants because of the prohibition against a menstruant, and we separate them for 3 months in case they are pregnant. But if they were minors incapable of childbirth, we store them immediately. If they were from the daughters of Kohanim, they are disqualified from eating truma. If someone performed chalitza with his Yevama, and then she was found to be pregnant as she gave birth, if the child is capable of living, he is permitted to marry her relatives, and she is permitted to marry his relatives, and he has not disqualified her from the priesthood. If the child is not capable of living, he is forbidden to marry her relatives, she is forbidden to marry his relatives, and he has disqualified her from the priesthood.
Okay. Megillah base.
Okay. If one read it discontinuously or while half asleep, if he has fulfilled his obligation. If one was writing it, expounding it upon it, or correcting it, provided he had intent, he fulfilled his obligation. If not, he did not fulfill his obligation. If it was written with orpiment, vermilion, gum, or ferrous sulfate, or on paper or on an unfinished parchment, he did not fulfill his obligation unless it is written in Assyrian script on parchment and with ink. A townsman who went to a walled city, or a city dweller who went to a town, if he intends to return to his home, he reads it at the same time as in his home, but if not, he reads it with them. From what part of the Megillah must one read in order to fulfill his obligation? Rabbi Meir says all of it. Rabbi Yehuda says from there was a Jewish man, and Rabbi Yossi says from after these things. That's it. Adkan?
One more, Dalit as well.
Really? All right. All are qualified to read the Megillah except one who is deaf, an imbecile, or a minor. And Rabbi Yehuda declares a minor qualified. We may not read the Megillah, nor circumcise, nor perform ritual immersion, nor sprinkle purification water. Similarly, a woman who counts a day corresponding to a day may not immerse herself until the sun has risen. However, if any of them did so after the first ray of dawn appeared, the act is valid. So, I found it interesting at the Bell's shul that they were talking about the cloth and all, and then say for Torah and all. And I asked if they use cloth when they do when they do a Megillah, root, and he said no. He said they don't do that. The Rebbe has his cloth, and he may read from it himself, but they don't use the cloth. I was very surprised.
What do you mean they don't use a cloth?
They could use a book, or you could use
Megillah.
Yeah.
No, you misunderstood. I mean, the Megillah has to be read. The Baal Koreh, who reads it out for the Kehillah, has to read from a cloth. There's no question about that.
What about the other ones? What about the roots or
So all the others, that's optional. If you do read from a cloth, then you also make a bracha of Mikra Megillah, which if you choose to read from those, but that's optional. That you can read from a Chumash or whatever else, or from a Tanakh. That's fine. But for Megillah, there's a specific obligation to read it from the cloth. Because it's a specific mitzvah. It's one of the specific mitzvahs of Purim is to hear the Megillah.
I thought that, but it sounded very strange that the Rav had the Rebbe had one, but the way I understood, unless I presented the question in a different way, that he didn't understand what I meant. I was trying to.
There's no way that they're not reading it from the cloth.
All right, so I misunderstood. He misunderstood. And we did it together. All right. Dalit. What did they do with the remainder of the truma? They made gold sheets to plate the Holy of Holies. Whereas Mishna says the profit of the fruits is used to purchase animals which are offered upon the altar when it is idle, and the remainder of the truma is used for the utensils needed for the temple service. Rabbi Akiva says the remainder of the truma is used to purchase animals which are offered upon the altar when it is idle, and the remainder of the nesachim is used for the utensils needed for the temple services. Rabbi Kaninya says, Sagan of the Kohanim says, the remainder of the nesachim is used to purchase animals which are offered upon the altar when it is idle, and the remainder of the truma is used for the utensils needed for the temple service. Neither one nor the other admitted concerning the possibility of profiting from the fruits. What did they do with the remainder of the incense? They would set aside from the truma an amount equal to the artisan's wages and redeem the incense with the artisan's wages. They would give the incense to the artisans the wages and repurchase it from them with funds from the new truma. If the new shkalim came in time, they purchased the incense with funds from the new truma, if not from the old. If one concentrated his possessions and among them were things suitable for communal offerings, these things should be given to the artisans for their wages. These are the words of Rabbi Akiva. And Asa said, this is not the same method described above. Rather, they set aside from these things an amount equal to the artisan's wages and redeem them with funds set aside for the artisan's wages. Then they give them to the artisans as their wages and repurchase them with funds for the new truma.
Okay. Shmias also Dalit.
If one thins out olive trees, the Shammai says he cuts them to the roots, but Hillel says he may uproot them. But they admit that if he levels, he may only cut them to the roots. What is thinning? 1 or 2 leveling. 3, one next to the other. When does this apply? To his, but not his neighbors. Even if he levels, he may uproot. If one splits wood off of an olive tree, he may not cover it with earth. He may cover it with stones or with straw. And if he cuts down a sycamore tree, he may not cover it with earth, but he may cover it with stones or with straw. One may not cut a virgin sycamore tree in the 7th year because it is regarded as work. Rabbi Yehuda says it is forbidden in the usual manner unless he raises 10 handbreadths or cuts down the roots. If one clips vines or cuts reeds, Yossi Agili says he must keep distance 1 handbreadth. Rabbi Akiva says he cut in his usual manner, but with an axe, a sickle, or a saw, or with whatever he prefers. A tree which split may be tied up in the 7th year, but not so that it should heal, but it should not continue. Kalim Kaf Daled Yud Aleph. There are three water skins and 3 shepherd's pouches. Those that contain the prescribed amount are susceptible to becoming tamei with midrash tuma, and those that cannot be contained the prescribed amount are susceptible to becoming tamei with corpse tuma, and those made of fish skin are tahor from any form of tuma. There are 3 animal hides. A hide designed for use as a rug is susceptible to becoming tamei with midrash tuma. A hide used as a wrapping for utensils is susceptible to becoming tamei with corpse tuma. And a hide intended for use as straps or sandals is tahor from any kind of animal. I'm sorry, any kind of tumor. There are 3 sheets. A sheet that is designed for lying, one is susceptible to becoming tamei with midrash tuma. A sheet that is designed for use as a curtain is susceptible to becoming tamei with corpse tuma, and a sheet that pictures is tahor from any form of tuma. Okay. And we are at Shavuos. Reb Shimon ben Yehuda says in his name, the he-goats of Rosh Chodesh atone for a person who is tahor or ate a contaminated sacrifice. Those are the festivals surpass them in that they atone for a person who is tahor who ate a contaminated sacrifice, and for one who had no awareness either in the beginning or at the end. Those of Yom Kippur surpass them in that they atone for a person who was tahor who ate a contaminated sacrifice, or for one who had no awareness either in the beginning or at the end, or for one who had no awareness in the beginning or had awareness at the end. They said to him, may one be sacrificed for another? He said to them, yes. They said to him, if so, take those of Yom Kippur may be sacrificed in Rosh Chodesh. Then how can those in Rosh Chodesh be sacrificed on Yom Kippur to effect an atonement which does not belong to them? He said to them, they all come to atone for the tumah of the temple and its holy things. The deliberate tumah of the temple and its holy things, the he-goat which is sacrificed inside in Yom Kippur atone. For other transgressions of the Torah were the lighter gray, willful or unintentional, of which he was aware and of which he was unaware, positive commandments and negative commandments, those liable to karas and capital sins. The he-goat which was sent away to Azal atones. Okay. This applies equally to Yisraelim, Kohanim, and the anointed Kohen. What is the difference between the Yisraelim Kohanim and the anointed Kohen? Only that the blood of the bull atones for the Kohanim for the truma of the temple and for its holy things. Reb Shimon says, just as the blood of the he-goat which is sacrificed inside atones for Israel, so the blood of the bull atones to the Kohanim. Just as the confession above the he-goat which is sent away to Azazel atones for Israel, so the confession of the bull atones for the Kohanim.
Okay. That's for today.
Okay. Have a great day. Enjoy. Looks very nice out there today.
It does indeed.
I'm going to check this thing. I don't think I can get a hold of the tour guide again because maybe he just misunderstood what I was asking about. All right.
Okay. Have a good day.
Bye.